Good Erev Shabbos, everybody. This week's Parsha is that of Nitzavim, and it begins, Atem Nitzavim Hayom Kulchem. Today, you are all standing before the Lord your God. Roshechem Shivtechem, the leaders, the heads of your tribes. Ziknechem V'Shoitrechem, the elders, the officers, Kol Ish Yisrael, every man of Israel. Then it says, Tapchem V'Shechem, your children, your wives, the strangers amongst you. You are all standing here before God. La'avracha bivris Hashem Elokecha va'olasa, that you shall enter a covenant with the Lord your God, and you shall take an oath thereby. Covenant that God is establishing with you today. Questions are, number one, the verse begins by saying, Atem Nitzavim Hayom Kulchem. Kulchem means all of you. As it says at the end of the verse, Kol Ish Yisrael, every man of Israel. If it says that all of you are standing here before God, why then must it delineate and say the leaders of your tribes, the elders, the men, the women, the children? It says all of you. That's an all-inclusive term. Why specify? In addition, it begins by saying, Atem Nitzavim Hayom Kulchem. It's speaking in the plural. All of you, everyone, all of you are standing before God. And then it says, La'avracha, that each individual should enter this covenant and take an oath. Why does it switch from the plural to the singular? It should have said li'avrachem, that all of you shall enter into this particular oath and covenant. In addition, what does it mean that you are standing here today? What is Moshe Rabbeinu pointing out by saying Atem Nitzavim? You're standing here today. And if we'd be sitting, why does it have to emphasize this? So the Kli Yakar states that Rashi mentions from a medrash in which it says, when Klal Yisrael in last week's Parsha, portion of Kisava, where we had the Teichach, we had all of the curses, the horrible circumstances that shall befall our people should we go astray. And it says that Klal Yisrael heard 98 different curses, horrific situations, Holocaust, inquisitions. And they heard a description of 98 forms. And that's in addition to that which Moshe Rabbeinu shared with us in the name of God at the end of Leviticus, Parshas B'chukaisei, in which there were 49 such curses. Ramban says the 49 of Leviticus referred to the period of the destruction of the first temple. The 98 referred to the period of the destruction from the second temple. When Klal Yisrael heard this, 49, 98, Hayriku Paneim, their faces turned green. Who can withstand? How can we possibly have any hope that we should be able to survive? Question is, because they heard an additional 98, it brought them to that point. If we go back to the book of Leviticus and we see the horrible suffering, exile that our enemies would bring upon us for our going astray and abandoning God's Torah, there were 49 such curses. That's not enough. That's not enough to turn our faces green and place us in shock and awe. Only now that we heard an additional 98, the Kli Yakar explains and says, what is this covenant that we are entering into now with God? We have many covenants. What is this covenant? What is this oath? This is the oath and the covenant of Arvus. Arvus means responsibility. As we say, Kol Yisrael, Arevim Zelos, that every Jew has a responsibility for his fellow Jew. We have a responsibility to see that they are healthy, spiritually healthy. In addition to the mitzvahs of charity and kindness to help them with their financial necessities, Arvus is not just a responsibility like someone has. I have a debt, I have to pay my debt. Arvus means we are one. This concept of responsibility, if a person has an infection in their finger, they're going to say, well, that's not me, that's just my finger. That's ludicrous. Your finger is you. Oh no, that's just an extremity. I'm connected to my finger. That is you. What happens in the finger happens to the whole body. This is the concept. What happens with one Yiddish neshama, one Jewish soul. We are connected. We're one body. We're one entity. We're all one spiritual being. If something happens to the spiritual welfare of one Jew, it impacts all of us. Another way to understand this, we're all in the same boat. If somebody says, oh, there's a hole, there's a leak, but that's only on your side of the boat. My side is okay. It's absurd. The whole boat is now in jeopardy of sinking because we are in this together. We're one, we're united. When Klal Yisrael heard these curses, the teichacha, the words of rebuke in the book of Leviticus, they did not yet have this covenant that we indeed are one and responsible for each other, but rather we looked at each other as individuals. And Nebuch, if this person, if it befalls him such horrible consequences because his sins, he's gone astray, he's turned his back on his God, on his Torah, now what does it have to do with me? It's unfortunate. I feel very bad. But that doesn't affect me. We're in a different boat. We're not connected. But now that Klal Yisrael heard an additional 98, and these 98 are telling us that we are all one. And if one person goes astray and we have the ability to make a difference in their lives, we can say a kind word. We can offer a shoulder, we can be there, we can inspire them, we can strengthen them, we can invite them to our homes for a Shabbos. And we don't do anything, we bear a responsibility because we are connected. Now Klal Yisrael hears that we're all connected, and if I don't do enough for that person, it can affect me and impact on me. They turn green. How are we going to survive? What can we do? This is the meaning that Hashem says, I'm addressing all of you today. And I'm addressing all of you in the plural, but be aware that this covenant renders all of you as one singular entity. La'avracha. After we accept this covenant and we take this oath unto God, then we are all considered one individual. So it changes from the plural to the singular. We have become one singular unit. And this is why it states that all of you are entering this. We're going to delineate. Don't think that the responsibility lies on the shoulders of the great leaders who can pass laws, on the elders who are our teachers, on the officers who carry it out, on the judges. This element of responsibility of Arvis, that we must guarantee the spiritual being of our fellow Jew to the best of our ability, falls on everyone, every man, every woman, even children. We have a responsibility for children, even if they're not our own, to see that we have proper Jewish education for them. This is what the meaning is of this particular covenant. And this I would like to suggest. Atem Nitzavim Hayoim Kuchem. Today, You are all standing together. What does it mean we're standing? That when we are together as one, we feel a responsibility, a connection. I feel that what happens to my fellow Jew happens to me, and that I have some responsibility to intervene if I can. We can't always do anything. People might not want to listen. They're not interested. But we have to try, see if it's possible, see if we can do something to elevate the whole spiritual well-being of our community, whether we can teach, whether we can support, whether we can see this Jewish education or a kollel, whatever it might be, that we have a healthy, functioning synagogue. If we accept upon ourselves this responsibility, then we shall stand. Then we're Nitzavim. Then we can stand and withstand all that shall be thrust upon us by our enemies. This is why it says, Atem Nitzavim. We're standing, we can stand firm, and we will stand well-rooted. Why? Because Klal Yisrael is one. Many people stand in astonishment how a small army like that of Israel can overwhelm and defeat such incredible numbers. We're outnumbered. So many countries with so many hundreds of millions of people against one little state of Israel, an army. Yes, we're very clever. Yes, we're blessed. But how is it possible? Anyone who's been in the armed forces, whether Israel or in America, will testify and say, when we feel to our fellow soldier as a brother, as a sister, and that's me out there, and I can't leave them, we become much greater and much stronger. We become indefeatable. We cannot be overwhelmed. We cannot be defeated. And especially we find this by Klal Yisrael, because Klal Yisrael knows we can't count on anyone other than Hashem to help us. Yes, there are those who've been kind to us, there's no question. But when push comes to shove, we have Hashem and we have each other. And with that, we are able to stand and withstand to this very day. As we are now standing on the threshold of Rosh Hashanah, I believe that it is so important for us, this Yontif, in addition to all of our prayers, to ask Hashem to bless us not only with good health and success, but shalom. Shalom in our community and shalom for Klal Yisrael throughout the world. And that this shalom that we ask for, we must recognize that it can only be achieved when we feel that connection. When I feel someone else's pain is my pain, someone else's hardship is my hardship, someone else's confusion is my confusion. And if all I can do is just make a phone call and say, how you doing and I care about you, then I have to do that. We all have to do that. We are all one. Maybe we'll daven in separate places, different minyanim, and maybe we have differences of opinions. But we can respect each other, love each other. And we can focus on that Klal Yisrael is one. Where there's unity, Hashem says, this is my kind of environment. I love unity. I love an effort for shalom. And that's where I want to dwell. That's where I want to be found. Let's focus on shalom, and may God hear our prayers, and we should be blessed with a year of peace, health, happiness, and success in all of our endeavors. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay Jewish. Have a good Shabbos.